So those of you who have this, you know what we're kind of going to do. And if you don't have one and want one, there's still some here. And if we get enough people, we can put it split screen and display it. So brief introductions. And since we don't have a runner, I think we're going to have to ask you to just kind of march around and say that your introduction, your name, your meeting, and what do I hope to learn from this workshop. So whoever's brave, step up over there, if you will. Scott, what do you, I can't hear what he said. Did anyone?
Would you like me to share the screen?
With the yes, please. So please, just, nobody will be able to hear you, including Jerry, if you don't do it on a mic. Just say your name, meeting, what you hope to learn in the workshop. Oh, we've got the hand mic now. Thank you.
I'm Hank from Liveoak Friends Meeting in Houston. This is the second yearly conference I made in 26 years. I'm glad to be here and I'm learning a lot.
So I'm John Coffin from the Friends Little Meeting and the Little Rock Friends Meeting in Little Rock. I'm involved on an individual basis doing AVP in one of the local prison units and also instigating an AVP program more community-wide. It's just sort of getting off the ground, but we're hopeful. Violence levels in the Little Rock City and in the Pulaski County, the county around Little Rock, are very high right now. Not unusual. And so there's an uproar in the community itself about something has to be done. And we'll see if AVP and some other programs might be an answer. And I think if we get that program underway, we will be seeking support from beyond the meeting. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Tracy Carmack. I am with the Norman Friends Meeting, and I'm just here with an open mind, just ready to learn some things.
I'm Terry English with the Friends Meeting of Austin. I hope to learn whatever is taught.
My name is Jimmy Pryor. I'm from Liveoak Meeting in Houston, and I am exploring the relationship between different aspects of movement for life, from the spiritual support to the building of alternatives to the more activist work, and how those relate to each other, and how the activists and how everybody really, but especially the activists, can get the spiritual nurturance that they need.
Hi, Liz Wolf with the Dallas Friends Meeting. I mean, I'm curious about ways people have been supported in justice work, and I'm also curious in pretty small meetings how one balances out the justice work and activism with the spiritual work, because not either of them really work, but it's all takes energy.
I'm Karen Takimoto with Fayetteville, Arkansas Friends Meeting. And I think many friends, including myself, have little voices within ourselves that need encouragement. And so how to encourage and inspire us to listen more deeply to those voices and and find the support and strength in which to take action upon them.
Richard Coral with Liveoak Friends Meeting, Houston. I think that a lot of good work goes on, and a lot of in a lot of different directions, and helping people support something that is not their own. I think is important because even if it's not your issue, you can support them in doing that, and in turn, hopefully, they'll support you.
Dale Bordelon, Dallas Friends Meeting. I'm real interested. Just briefly previewing the handout, I'm very interested in the process, and I look forward to filling in the blanks on that. Thanks.
I'm on Burnham Fort Worth meeting and I'm late, so I'm not going to take up any more of your time.
Okay. Did Edwin Campbell want to introduce himself?
They say no. Scott, did you want to introduce yourself? Do you have a mic enough to do it with?
I don't have a mic.
Of course he does.
I'm Scott Carmack. I'm with the Norman Friends Meeting, and I'll show up to anything that has the word discern in it. Because discerning seems so simple, and yet for me it seems to not be so simple. So I'm ready to learn to discern, as it were.
Learn to discern. Hey, that has nice ring.
Okay. We have an Edwin online.
Well,
Edwin Campbell.
He's a tech clerk, and I think he's wanting to hide behind his tech clerk coat.
Okay, and how about Larry T?
Those are online people, and they're not involved with interaction.
Oh, okay. Well, welcome to you guys anyway. And I think you can chat, and if you've got questions or comments. Is that true, Scott, that they can chat?
They can chat.
They can chat.
Okay.
John, won't you come down here, please? Oh, okay. All right, I think we're ready to go. We have showing up here, I'm Val Liveoak, Friends Meeting of San Antonio. Showing up here and in paper copies on the table if you want them, are the kind of an outline of what we're going to do in here. And we have a couple of people came in late, but I think we'll just go ahead because we don't have a lot of time. And basically, I think what we're hoping to do is give you ideas and resources for supporting, or if you're looking to get support, to know what to ask for in using a lot of the different things that Quakers have used. But first, I want to ask initially, and for just a few brief responses, and who's got the mic, and will you run it? Okay, will you or someone run the mic if it's needed? The first query: how do we see working for justice as a Quaker ministry on individual, meeting, and Quaker or other organizational levels? When you're ready to talk. Thank you. I think it is. Is it on? Can you?
That makes a difference. Okay, so I knew I was a faith-based pacifist before I knew I was a Quaker, but I really think it would not be sincere to be a pacifist and not work for justice. So I think it is really an integral part of being a Quaker is to work for justice. And the question is what you do, when, and how.
Thank you. Somebody else want to respond to that query? We're not going to go around and ask everyone to, but we have to hear a few more responses.
So, yeah, I think the collaboration, that is seeing God in everyone and being able to work across outside of Quakerism to any group that has similar goals, even though they may not think they do. They would have similar people that they needed to get help from. So I think using the fact that we work with anybody and looking at it that there's not everybody is somebody that we can collaborate with.
Anyone else here who would like Jimmy?
So I think of it as more working for life than working for justice, and see it as something that a lot of people do, and a lot of non-human life does too. And it's not particularly a Quaker thing, though many Quakers do it. So I find like-minded people, residents that help support my sense that I'm and help discern my sense of direction, but that it's not particularly a Quaker thing, and it's much broader than that. So I don't know, individual meeting or Quaker. I think that, I don't know, I have, I see a need for people to work with others that are like-minded outside of Quaker designation, but find support within their Quaker community.
Let's combine the second and third queries and see what comes to you quickly, if we can, about what support are you aware of has been given to those led to work? I thought I took that A out. Led to work for justice, and where was it found? And then do you or your meeting want to do or support work for justice?
In the panel discussion, I discussed how money was a big support that was needed. Also, the other support I've received is having an anchor committee from the monthly meeting. And then from prisoner visitation and support, they provided conferences and had personnel available in case we couldn't get into the prison. So those were great, great ways to be supported.
Karen?
When I was feeling led to go up to Minnesota to Line 3, I asked for a clearness committee, and at that time I was considering just going, whether anybody wanted to go with me or not, and but I was really hesitant to go by myself. I was a little leery, and I reached out to QEW, Shelley Tannenbaugh, just to throw the question out if there was anybody that she knew of who was going up. And there were several days before I got a response. And when she responded, several days later, it was like, yes, I'm thinking of going, and I'm thinking of going with Marianne Percy, who was my workshop leader from Gathering. So I still met with my clearness committee, but I felt with that support with the two others that I knew who would be going, I felt very, very comforted and comforted in following this. And then my meeting also gave me a minute of support as well as funds to take with me. So I think part of my lesson was being vocal, asking for the help, and allowing that to happen.
Well, I call that looking for a way to open and following it on tiptoes. You know, with real care, is this really an opening? You know, is this the right direction? You know, but looking for the openings and then finding things that seem to me to point in that direction. And that's an individual discernment type of activity. As you said, you thought it kind of got rid of the need of a clearness committee because you became very clear in that process. And that's one that I experienced a lot in my work. Does anyone else want to speak on this?
Can I add one more validation? As we drove, I picked up Shelley and Marianne in Minneapolis to drive up to the Red Lake Treaty Camp in northern Minnesota. And as we drove along, there was one stretch where a bald eagle came alongside my car and flew with us, as if saying, you are going in the right direction. And that was so meaningful.
Thank you.
May not be exactly the right time, but what Liz said in the panel this morning really resonated with me. And that is essentially, I'm a 6.5 day a week activist organizer. And I frequently feel really reluctant to try to push opening or way with my own meeting. And I'm sometimes frustrated because I offer up things, and it may be that some meetings are just more inclined to be socially active, but I really haven't figured out the right way to approach my own meeting.
Would a good query to the meeting be, I'm doing this. Is the meeting led in any way to help? And just see what comes. If you don't ask, you're not likely to get it. And so to ask an open-ended, question. Mike, were you wanting to speak?
Yeah, I would. This clearance committee, I've had them and they work for me, but just a note to, when I'm working, my release is to work with Indigenous people. And a clearance committee of Quakers who don't represent Indigenous people is lacking in support. So I also feel it's important to meet with the people I'm working with to get clearness with them that it's appropriate for me to be there and be involved. And in what ways is it appropriate for me to be involved, or when I should step back?
That's very good. Jerry, do you want to start or move down the list of things we thought we'd talk about? We've talked about some individual discernment. You have.
Yeah, we were just going to go through there and briefly discuss these, with the audience. So, for me, for individual discernment with the with my PVS work, I was at the Morgantown meeting and I just moved into the neighborhood. And we got a letter from Prisoner Visitation and Support saying that we've got a new prison and we'd like some visitors. And they sent us a DVD about the program. And I don't know if it was as much of a leading as much as a just, I have the time, I have the desire, I'm going to do it. So I didn't have a clearness committee or anything like that with the meeting. I just went out and started doing it.
So one of the reasons Jerry's here, besides being a great guy, is that he's done a huge amount of research on many Quaker processes, and he has written a pamphlet. We had one in the store, but this is my copy if anybody wants to look at it and think about ordering it. As you know, we were ordering pamphlets. There really is a lot on discernment, and both at the individual group level and various issues to discern. We talked about some of them this morning. I think everyone was here. I can't tell.
What is the pamphlet called?
Individual Spiritual Discernment.
Thank you.
It's number 443 of the Pendle Hill pamphlet series. So,
and then it says something about testing, receiving, testing, and implementing, which are the main chapters.
great. Because testing is something often done individually, as we said. Anything, and we saw that, we talked about this morning, that if you do a clearness committee, and one question is, are you clear? Next question is, do you want the meetings held? And the third is, does the meeting want to be known as the sponsor or the, a support of your work as a position that the meeting wants to take on that identification with the work. And so I always like to hear a clearness committee make a recommendation to meeting about meetings involvement, as well as report the results of the discernment, the individual discernment. Because it's a different thing when it's a meeting project that you're doing. And you want to quickly run over, Jerry, the spiritual anchor committees, holding ministry and life, that first point? Do you have some things to add to that? Or
yeah, if they could scroll up a little bit on that. Thank you, Scott. So spiritually, there's the support of an anchor committee, which I mentioned earlier today, that it is support and accountability and clearness. And there's also a holding in the ministry in the light. And I usually travel with an elder, and the elder, I asked the elder ahead of time to hold me and the participants in the light before and during the workshop. And I do the same thing. And if I get a letter out to the participants, I ask them to hold the group in the light also prior to the program. And I find that really helps a lot. It just seems to center the group and center me.
So
anybody else want to share on that? I did want to let you know that at the end of this handout is all kinds of information that goes into great depth. So if you're actually thinking about doing this, you need to go to those sections of those two links And it's by Central Philadelphia yearly meeting, and they've done a lot of this kind of work. And the other one's by FGC, or it comes through FGC maybe. But I would recommend going to that so you don't have to reinvent the wheel.
Liz?
It's maybe my personal thing. But for me, it's a barrier to asking for support because it feels like then I have to figure out how to help people know what the support is. It's a lot of work to get there. And sometimes I'm not sure that that's really what people want to do, and they might do it because they like me, but is there someone who's really going to help hold it in the light and in the spirit to know if that's really what the meeting's leading is? Anyway, I struggle with that, so.
One thing I learned in my failed processes to really have an organized support ongoing was that the focus person for the support, the person receiving the support, should not be asked to convene the meeting, each meeting. The group can either say, yes, let's meet on a regular basis every X time, but someone else in the group should be asked and take the responsibility to convene it so that the person doesn't feel like they're asking every single time. And I also promote the concept of the mutual support group so that we all know we're getting together to work on our work from the Quaker with a Quaker grounding to it, so that you can rotate who's convening the meeting, but that it still happens on a regular basis and everyone gets a chance to talk about or feel some group discernment process about what they're working on. There's a lot of logistical things, and maybe you don't need someone to do fundraising because you're working for an organization, it's your job. Or maybe I didn't need as much fundraising as some people because I'm independently poor. So, I just had enough money or whatever to pretty much on my own, but I didn't want to pay. But like Jerry, I didn't want to have to pay the costs of my ministry out of my own funding. I had enough for my subsistence and so forth. I was lucky in that regard. So there's just all kinds of different issues, and sometimes talking it through with people is helpful. Jimmy, you talked about involvement with organizations beyond the meeting. Do you want to say any more on that at this point?
Yeah, I'm thinking of a situation right now where I am involved with a local climate group that I'm pushing to be more organized, and I've kind of become the organizer of this process. and become the the facilitator of it, and it could be helpful to have other people that were not involved in the organization, friends, to offer support. And when it was being talked about having a supporting minister. What's the term for that?
Elder.
And an elder go along. I thought, well, that's interesting. I don't know that I would want to have it announced that I had that this is so and so is my elder here in this meeting, but just having them in the meeting and knowing that they were present and lending their presence could be a helpful thing. And I think that's, I mean, I usually find myself in non-Quaker settings, but for which friendly support, more in a clearness committee or discernment or sort of situation, I think could be helpful.
Maybe we can just call them companion.
Yeah.
The tradition is elder with that sense of that, and but certainly companion with. I've had companions on some of my speaking tour trips, been very helpful. If you're working with companions and you want to be a little more formal about it, you might want to schedule a morning and then an evening time of checking in and prayer and worship together. And that will give you the opportunity to touch back to the foundation of the work together. Care for the minister, Jerry, would you like to address, do you have ways you can tell that you've been cared for as a minister?
I guess mostly through my anchor committee, just supporting me. I haven't needed a lot of care because things have gone fairly smoothly. But yeah, my biggest source of care is when I have elders. And if I'm doing a week-long workshop, I definitely have an elder. And that makes a big difference. But if I'm only doing an hour workshop, it's usually just too expensive to have an elder, to bring one in, because you don't want to use an elder from the meeting because you want the meeting to fully participate. That's about all I can say about care for the minister.
I'm sorry, what did we do?
Just speak. It's on.
So I'm sorry. You said no? Okay, thank you. I missed what you just said. You said it's too expensive if the elder is there. It wasn't clear. What does he mean by that?
Yeah, the expense is to have them fly in, or motel rooms, or meals. When I traveled with FWCC, they really didn't have much money, and I really felt that our money goes much further in the Central and South America than up here in North America. So, well, it even goes further in Mexico too, I might add, but Latin America, I should say. So I didn't want to spend extra money that could be going towards the other half of the section of Americas.
I see.
But
I see. That's a level of support that is, I'm not so familiar with. The level of support that I'm interested in generally is like to have a couple $100 a month that we could use to support our programs. And what I was going to ask all of us gathered here is, when you have a source of financial support,
report, are you building up a treasury first? In other words, you get the meeting to say, we'll put in $450 and we want a partner who will put in $450. Or are you doing it only on a please help us pay the bills?
For me, I submit a budget at the beginning of the year of how much I think I'm going to spend. It's usually around $5,000. This is not cheap. And then as long as it's within the budget, the treasurer just cuts a check.
Is that the way in SCYM? Is that the way most of our supported social action operations?
Well, no, it's coming out of the monthly meeting, not the yearly meeting.
Obviously, we do a budget, but in terms of when the money starts flowing, do you have a kitty all filled, or do you just say, look, it's your turn to pay this bill, we'll pay the next one? It's a scale. I know it has to do with the scale of the financials, and I'm just curious, are some of us at that level where we put a $5,000 or $10,000 budget together and then split it down the middle by paying the bills, or is it more hand to mouth?
Friends Peace Teams programs. I think that Terry's going to want that next. Friends Peace Teams programs start with the budget at the beginning of the fiscal year with a carryover from whatever they have in the previous year, and then do fundraising around the remainder with a focus on the remaining needs. And that so far has been good, but if you get 8 months into the budget and you're running low on money, you change your plans. On the other hand, if someone drops what is for you a big amount of money on your program, then you think, oh my goodness, now we can really look at that thing we were hoping for, but we didn't have money for. That's how you do it on a long extended basis. It's a little different than an individual doing a project here and a project there. Then it's usually wise, I think, to have as much funding as you basically need for the project in the bank before you undertake it. Terry?
Well, with the Austin meeting, we've had a few.
Closer to your mouth might help.
A few ministries that have had a somewhat substantial budget, and we've just did the necessary fundraising to meet it. In other cases, it's been necessary. We had sufficient support. We knew, and we knew we could meet that budget or even more. Other activities, we've had times when we planned on spending a certain amount of money per year, including ministry activities like the prison ministry, for example, and that's and then that's being supported by the donations we get, and we have sadly come up short on the donations, but met all the expenses, so to speak, by dipping into our savings, which is a bad long-term plan, of course. It can be really hard to budget anyhow, I think, because one is constantly being surprised by unexpected costs or unexpected need or an unexpected reduction in income as well.
You don't need to turn it off.
I think that we just have to have faith that if we're meant to be doing that work, that even if we're using savings to do it, that it's really the best plan. And pay more attention to the work than the money, I think.
So how many political candidates lend their campaigns money? A lot, especially on a smaller scale. So it's not just groups like us that are doing this in a, well, less than common practice situation. It's true that sometimes if we have a governing group, we can see if the governing group would be willing to accept it as a loan and then in advance of future fundraising. And the group may say, no, that's not, our leading is not to go to that degree. And then we say, okay, we'll try to fundraise in advance. And I'll give an example. We had in Latin America, there was a bunch of hurricanes that destroyed a lot of things on top of COVID and all that, you know. And so immediately we started asking people for money for it, but we had enough operating funds that we could advance the money immediately for the aid that we wanted to give and continue the fundraising for support to fill in that blank. So it happens out in the non-Quaker world, but we do it in the Quaker world sometimes. Can you talk about mutual support, accountability committees, and faithfulness groups a little bit, Jerry?
Well, the only difference between a mutual support and accountability committee and an anchor committee is the discernment part. And I really do think the discernment should be in there, that because then you can easily have a clearness committee of people that know you. If you're wondering about whether you should accept an invitation, or if you're overrunning your budget, or I don't know, just all kinds of things. You know, they're there to help you. Faithfulness groups is something that Marcel Martin wrote a book on. And they, in essence, are clearness committees. And you, in her model, one person is the focus person for half the session, and the other person is the focus person for the other half of the session. And there's two more people. And then the next time they meet, those two are the focus people. So you get to have a focus, you get to be a focus person every other meeting. So it's different than a clearness committee. And spiritual friendships, that kind of is like with spiritual directors too, where you, in spiritual directors, it's kind of a hierarchy. In spiritual friendship, it's much more Quaker, because you're each asking the other how the Spirit is leading them. So one person would speak for half an hour, and then the other person would speak for half an hour, or whatever half the time frame was. Trish Roberts wrote an excellent pamphlet on that. And there's also books on it, even non-Quaker books on spiritual friendships. Anything to add on that, Val?
Not really. If the committees are ongoing, they just really need a schedule and a convener that is not it's not the focus person. If there's only one focus person, or that's rotated if it's a mutual support meeting, which I already said. But I don't know. I shared with Liz what I intuited Liz was saying earlier about hesitate and Lon. Hesitating to ask, because it's sort of scary to ask something that someone might say no to, especially if they're the people you want to care about and they care about you and all. And if you have anything less than quite perfect confidence that you are loved and esteemed and cared for, and if you do, God bless you, you're lucky. If you have anything but that, it's sometimes very difficult to even ask. On the other hand, if as we talked about earlier this morning, if you can think of inviting people as, would you like to have a piece of this work? That sometimes, would the meeting like to be a part of this work? And then if they say no, you say, okay, well, I'm going to keep doing it, whatever. But if they say, well, how? You know, then you can start that conversation. And there are formal things to request. I assume, Jerry, did you initiate a request for a traveling letter?
Yes. You know, after the meeting decided to take me, you know, after the clearance committee and the recommendation that the meeting take me under its care, then the first thing we did was, as the anchor committee, was to write a traveling minute.
I think we have talked about elders. This last thing that we have is reports. If you are supported or sponsored by any organized group, they deserve a formal report, whether in person, a verbal report or a written report. And like our meeting, we like to have people give verbal reports, but send the written report in too, so that we can have it in our minutes. And I think that's only fair. If you go with Friends World Committee and they ask you to go visit another meeting, even if they don't say, we expect you to write a report to us, I think you should volunteer to do that, because that is, you know, that's how they know what you did and how it's a payback that a sponsor gets, I would say.
Yeah, and it's also just in right order to keep things tidy with, you know, knowing what you did and when you did it, and you know, having it in the minutes and stuff, in the records of the meeting.
So it's you know, one of those things, you do the work, but then reporting on it is necessary as well. And I think being concerned about duration and the knowledge that at some point the ministry will be laid down is an important part. In my own process of retiring from coordinating peace building in Las Americas, I was working towards laying it down consciously for about 3.5 to 4 years before I actually turned it over to someone else. And part of the discernment of that was, oh my goodness, there was a grant available and we asked for it and we got it so that we could pay that person, because I was not paid. So that was one of those moments where the way opened. But there is discernment involved in laying it down, especially if you want the ministry to continue with different ministers.
And the rule of thumb I've always used is, am I doing it in the right spirit? You know, if I'm grudgingly giving a workshop or something, you know, it's time to lay it down. When people ask for, you know, just in regular life, if people are asking for things and then they're always asking and never giving, you know, it's like, I stopped doing it in the right spirit and I know it's time to just get away from this person. And that's what happened with with my visiting prisoners. I couldn't hear the prisoners, and I thought, I'm not doing justice to them, and I'm not doing it in the right spirit, because I get angry because I can't hear, and it isn't working. This is an aside, but it's kind of troubled me about laying down this ministry. Well, about this morning, somebody handed me an address of an incarcerated Quaker that is asking for letters. And I thought, oh, great, this is exactly what I do. You know, I know about the prisons and stuff, and I can write letters, and I can, hearing is not an issue. And it was sort of like God landed this in my lap, and I knew this is something I have the ability and the desire, and I'm going to do it.
So, Jimmy?
One thing that is on my mind is in my involvement with activist and activist organizations. I see people where I feel like that they could benefit from these things that we're talking about, but they're not Quakers. And I think, I wonder about and think about, is there a way to introduce some of these practices or other methods of care for activists, so they don't suffer and are able to be spiritually nourished and refreshed and be able to continue in the work. So it's kind of a general sort of concern, and I think it could manifest in different ways. But where we could minister to people, to activists and people in organizations, but not in the name of it being a Quaker practice. Help introduce practices of care into those situations.
I have a suggestion as a possibility, and it could be added to this. My colleague Nadine Hoover does work out of a program she calls Conscience Studio. Conscience. And what she does is lead people in workshops where they start discerning what their own conscience is telling them, and then provides some activities like developing a spiritual friendship, but they just call it a pair, and other aspects of communication. And what we're talking about really is governance, although I would never use that term with people unless you really knew that would be okay. But responsibility and accountability and those things, and start building that into interpersonal relationships and organizational relationships, those kind of things. And I do believe there is a manual of her conscience workshops available. If you check in with me later, or maybe I can find it online. That might be a way to bring it, because I think conscience is a part of even if they're not considering themselves spiritual, much less, that might be helpful.
It can also be called emotional support, or if it's a interfaith group or something, it could be prayer support. But you need to team people up so they can, have somebody listen to them. Everyone needs someone to listen deeply, in my opinion.
friends, is anyone else led to comment or discuss or questions as we wind down in this workshop? We actually are over time, I think, but. Jerry, last words?
I thought we ended at 5.
At 5-year time, we have till 4.
Right, okay, yeah, all right. Well, I just, we've painted a fairly rosy picture. And people need to know there's challenges. That it isn't as though when you're following your leading, you're not being tested. And how you respond to those tests is very important because that's part of the work also.
Let's go ahead then and enter into waiting worship, loosening worship. And as a way of closing our time together, thank you, friends.